So welcome to this repeat of one of the sessions that we held at the Edge reunion in July. And I'm really going to do nothing except be a kind of a techie assistant and just hand over to Jo and Ed. So over to you. Do you want me to call the PowerPoint up or go, Ed?
Not quite. Yeah, we'll get to it in a second. Thank you so much, Kim. So yes, welcome to this Doughnut economics session that Jo and I will be running through. The objective of the session is threefold. One is to give people an idea of the concept of Doughnut economics. The other one is to give some examples of where it's been applied in a urban situation and in a rural situation, which Jo will be taking us through. And then the third objective is to get people thinking about, well, asking any questions and making sure they've got the understanding they need to then think about how they might take it forward in their own lives in some way. You know, how might it be applied to local communities or local government or wherever else? The agenda that's going to get us there is there's a little bit of an intro by me, and then we're going to get into a 16-minute TED talk that Kate Raworth, the creator of Doughnut Economics, did a few years ago. And then I'm going to talk through the example of Amsterdam, where it's been applied. Jo, as I mentioned, is going to look at the rural example that she's focused on at the moment. She's also going to take us through a post-transition visioning exercise, which is going to set us up really nicely to do some work together on how we think this could work in our own communities or locally or in our own lives. So before we get into it all, so why am I sat here doing this today? Well, I'm here because I went on Kim's Edge retreat earlier in the year, and I also studied economics in the early 90s, so I've got a degree, a master's in economics. And at the end of all that studying, I ended up doing a number of other things and not really following economics. And I think the reason for that was it wasn't the economics I actually really wanted to be studying. And it wasn't until I discovered Doughnut economics in 2018 that I realized that that was this kind of stuff that I wanted to be studying, something that really opened the debate up on what's really important to society rather than getting me to solve what was a huge number of very complicated mathematical equations that in no way represented the reality of our human experience with buying and selling things and dealing with people's needs and everything you classed as economics. So for me, finding Kate and Doughnut Economics has revived my interest in economics, and actually to the extent that I'd say for me, it's become a bit of a framework for hanging off a number of other things that are out there that are going to help reduce the hideousness of what's coming down the tubes. And by that I mean things like permaculture, degrowth, transition towns. Circular economy are the kind of policies that I would expect to drop out of a discussion framed around Doughnut economics. We'll get to more on that as we go. What about Kate? So what do we know about Kate? So Kate Raworth is an eminent economist. She's a senior associate at Oxford University's Environmental Change Institute. She teaches a master's in environmental change and management. So she's got all those academic accolades you'd expect, but she's also very much into applying this. So she works at Amsterdam University as well and has helped Amsterdam apply Doughnut economics. She's also had a number of years on the ground as a development person. So she's worked with micro entrepreneurs in Zanzibar. She co-authored a human development report for the United Nations. She lived in New York for a while, and she's spent a decade as a senior researcher at Oxfam. So she's got a lot of practical development experience as well as all that academic economics experience. And that really shines through, I think, when you look at what Doughnut economics is. very briefly, is to get us all in the zone of what, why has she come up with donut economics in the first place? Now, she'll go into this in her 60 minutes TED talk, but fundamentally, what she's saying is we are overly focused on growth, in particular, things like gross domestic product, GDP. We've just had an election, even the Labour Party is still talking about growth, but growth doesn't value a number of things that are really, really important to us. It doesn't value things like equity, um, human rights, access to water, access to food. It doesn't value the planet's resources as well, in the sense of its natural resources, like forests, for example. There's no value put on that. So, so she argues, and I think she's absolutely right in this, our continual focus on just growing the economy is a pretty significant cause of the reason, one of the causes of the reasons why we're in the mess that we are in from an overshoot perspective and the resultant climate and nature emergency. So it's a measure of how well capitalism's doing. It's not a measure of how life on Earth, the quality of life on Earth is doing. We've been measuring the wrong thing. So examples of why GDP are really, why GDP is really the wrong thing to be measuring. Pushing the pension age up forces GDP to go up. Increasing the prison population forces GDP to go up. And cutting down a rainforest and turning it into whatever useless stuff, perhaps, or useful stuff, and turning it into a farm, you know, that forest is worth more to GDP when it's cut down than it is as a natural, glorious, thriving forest. So it's just completely bonkers that we've made that the be all and end all. So she's saying we're addicted to growth. It's killing our planet. We need to stop that addiction now. And she wants us to, what she's proposing is we focus much less on growth and much more on how we thrive, how life on this planet thrives. There we go. Hopefully that's started to warm us up. So I think we can actually go. So let's go to the slides now. Maybe let's go to slide 2. Let's have a picture of, let's have a see what Kate Rayworth actually looks like. And then we can go into the slide 3. Actually go into the YouTube. There we go. There's Kate. Oh, actually, you've got it on your C drive, haven't you? So that's cool. That's probably better. So this YouTube, just where we're getting up, is from 2018. What I'll do immediately after the YouTube is bring you absolutely bang up to date with where we are with the donut now in terms of where are we overshooting. Great, thanks, Kim. So yeah, lots to take on there, but let's maybe take a moment just to bring us bang up to date with the selfie that she showed. So slide 4 shows the latest situation in terms of, well, where are we now? And as I'm sure we're all guessing, things have only got worse. So one thing to know about this has been put together by some academics in Scandinavia. They've taken the donut and they've made it their own in terms of the classification. So as we get better at kind of looking at different categories, those categories themselves are changing a bit. But the idea is fundamentally the same. This is just looking at the planetary boundaries. It's not looking at the societal ones. So it's not looking at equity and water, access to water and education and things like that. It's looking at the planet's boundaries. Starting in the center, you can see the green safe operating space. And as you go out into the cake slices, the darker red and purple it gets, and the further out we go, that's indicating the more we have broken these boundaries. So you can see biosphere integrity in particular is looking pretty horrendous. But you can see that 6 of the 9 boundaries have now been passed as of 2023, and ocean acidification is approaching its boundary quite rapidly as well. So there's a link to that article, but just to give you that update, it's not a happy picture. So whereas I wonder, I don't know whether I can't remember that I said we're happy to take questions as we go. So if you do have questions or anything you want to share, just don't hold back. Do put it out there. Let's move on to the example then. So where has this been applied? So as I said, Kate works in Amsterdam, and the Amsterdam City Authority came to her and said, how can we do donut economics in Amsterdam? And basically they came up, again, they took the donut and made it their own. So they've looked at things through 3 different lenses. So there's 3 slides I'm going to show you on Amsterdam. This first one's the people side, so the social fabric side. The next one is a local ecological slide, and the third one is around Amsterdam's impact on the whole planet. So just coming back to that first one, the people level slide. So, and no one's saying that this is perfect, but what they did is they basically came up with a number of categories. So we're going to look at mobility and social equity. They came up with a target, and then they pulled some data together to have a look at where they are against that target. So the targets almost certainly could do with more work. The data they've got could almost certainly do with more work. But the point was to make some progress in understanding where they are, and thereby understand the gap between the target and their current situation, so they could start thinking about what policies they could put in place locally to bridge that gap. So let's have a look at the mobility one. If you could just go, sorry, yeah, no, that's it, thank you. Yeah, so no, it's fine. On the mobility one, so the city is accessible to everyone via public transport in a safe and accessible way. So I lived in Amsterdam for a bit, and it is one of the best cities I've ever lived in terms of accessibility of transport. So the data they got in 2017, the residents made an average of over 500,000 journeys by bike every day, which is great, and you really know it when you walk around the city. In 2018, they gave the city's public transport rating 7 out of 7 out of 10. So they've got an idea of where they've got to. And there will be some policies that they will have put in place in order to get them from that snapshot up to a better place in terms of the target. They also looked at social equity. Well, they looked at all of these things, but let's just have a look at social equity. Citizens enjoy greater independence and seldom experience inequality of opportunity. Now, interesting, they found that 16% of residents in lower income neighbourhoods feel they lack control over their lives, higher than the national average of 11%. Right, so that just starts a whole different conversation that you probably wouldn't be having if you hadn't started to look at Amsterdam through the lenses of the donut, basically. And one really important thing to start thinking about here is what Kate is doing is coming up with a framework which has got lots of different buckets, but she's also saying actually we need to think about how we solve these things holistically. So we're not just going to have one policy for mobility, one policy for social equity in silos. We need to think about how all of these policies that we might come up with, or activities that might come out of the community, that look at the social fabric of Amsterdam, that look at the local ecology and the impact of Amsterdam on the global climate and ecology, how do those policies interact? Yeah, so it's saying that things are, we're in a polycrisis. There's a lot of things going wrong. There's a lot of things we want to improve. How do we come up with an array of policies that work together where there's lots of synergies? So I increase mobility and I improve social mobility, and maybe I improve health all at the same time. Yeah. So it's a way of thinking more holistically about the policies you come up with. So let's move on then to the local ecology one. So this is relatively straightforward. So this is around regulating the temperature in the city. When the more trees you have down a street, if you take 2 streets in the same city, the one with the more trees in it basically is going to feel, not just look nicer, it's also going to feel cooler. That's what trees do, and it can actually be quite significant. So the city target they came up was increase the use of green spaces, green infrastructure. Don't like the term infrastructure, but that's the term they use. We get the idea. And what they found was that Amsterdam's temperatures can be up to 5 degrees warmer than surrounding areas, natural areas, due to the urban heat island effect. So this warming. So then that starts again a whole discussion about, well, actually, what do we want to do to make Amsterdam greener and cooler? And of course, this one also links to health. If you're thinking about mental health, well, how can we be, if we've got more green, where we're going to put that green, can we actually put it in places that count from a societal perspective as well, improve mental health, perhaps give people spaces where they can run around and all the rest of it. So you can see that there's lots of interconnections there. That's just one example. They looked at all these other buckets as well, enhancing well-being and cleanse the air. And then just to move on to the next slide, they also recognise that, you know, Amsterdam's a big city. It has an impact at a global level as well. So they looked at their carbon emissions. And this was pretty interesting because what they found was they came up with a target which was reduce the city's in boundary, so within the city boundaries, CO2 emissions to 55% below 1990 levels by 2030 and to 95% below by 2050. Now, clearly 2050 is like way too late, right? So the target is inadequate, but at least they wrote something down, even if it's way too late. What they found was when they looked at the data, and again, the data could be better, but this is what they got in 2017. Amsterdam's in-boundary CO2 emissions were 31% above 1990 levels. You know, so the carbon emissions that they're creating within the city have gone up dramatically. Well, what are you going to do about that then? You know, is the next question. How do we act on that? Very interestingly, though, 63% of the city's total CO2 emissions were produced beyond city boundaries. So, like many Western cities and many Western nations, we are outsourcing the production of things, stuff, whatever it is we buy on Amazon or wherever we buy it, to other places. You know, so again, that raises the question: what are we going to do about that? You know, so you get a whole different debate that perhaps you wouldn't be having if you hadn't applied a donut kind of perspective on the situation. So there we go. That's an example of where it's been applied in a city, very urban kind of situation. And Joe's going to take us on and look at a rural example. Over to you, Joe.
Must be a next slide moment. Hey. This came about listening to another video that Kate has done when she talks about obviously applying it to cities. That's where the idea first came from. And then obviously as time has progressed, she said, oh yeah, you know, cities, this could be applied to towns, villages. And then she says, oh, you could go really rural. And because I live in an incredibly rural area, I put it to another group that I run. I said, look, do you think we could have a go at creating some sort of donut locally? And it was met with a resounding yes, let's give it a go. And we came up with a 3 counties donut because I don't know if you can just about see the map in the middle. We've got at the bottom Gloucestershire, Herefordshire, top left, and then Worcestershire, top right. And actually where we hold our meetings is, funny enough, is right in the middle of those sort of conflux of where those 3 counties meet. So that's where it started. And the strap line at the moment is directly from Kate, creating a compelling vision of what it means to be a thriving location. And very quickly on me, in a sense it's not that relevant, but I've come to this after 40 years in financial services, not economics, but I think it probably meant that I'm not afraid of economics and statistics. So I was quite sort of open and welcome to taking this idea forward. Okay, moving on. Oh, this is interestingly, Kim, have you come across the How to Citizen podcast? And I'd not heard of it until very recently when John Alexander talked about it. And I went in to have a look, and lo and behold, there was Kate being interviewed on it.
It's very good. It's very good. I love it. I love it because it's a verb as well.
Well, exactly. And they were sort of trying to see if they can get away with it. You know, what's the effect on people if we try and, turn this, verbalize it, literally. And this was very recent. And so they put this to Kate. So I just thought it was quite interesting to post up her reply, which was be in action, ask ourselves, how do I travel? How do I eat, bank, heat my home, invest, divest, protest, and volunteer? And actually, just to say, these slides are a sort of taken from the workshop that we had on Sunday. So they're a little bit, not quite flowing, but I just picked out the ones I thought would be nicest to talk through today. Okay, next one. Oh, and actually, just going back to that one, that thing at the top, digest the donut, that's how that chap who does the podcast introduced it. That was the title he gave the podcast, which I thought was great. Okay. Now, we've called ourselves the Three Counties Doughnut at the moment, and conversations in our workshops about the different categories. The biggest thing that came out, not surprisingly, was food and how can we be resilient as a community from a food point of view, which obviously comes down to localization and localizing food. And so that's sort of where we've started, because the thing that's really difficult about the donut, the whole idea, is Kate doesn't actually give you any paths to follow or any templates to follow. She literally says, look, here's the idea, kind of get on and do it. So this is our first idea, and it came out, right, what can we do that's really proactive, maybe, within our understanding of the donut. So this is why we started with food. Okay, next one. And talking around the idea of a community hub, we just threw this out to the group and said, you know, if it was more than just a shop or a market or a farmer's market or whatever, what other things could we have there? And these were the things that came out. And I mean, actually, if you think about it, it creates the feeling a lovely space eventually. So grocer being the obvious one, where it would be a replacement for, in our case, our local co-op. So a shop that was not just a farm shop for those that, you know, could afford it, but how could we find a way to create a shop that, although sold local food, was also affordable local food? And also the idea of, there are lots of little community shops springing up all over the place. And actually, you know, most of them buy their dry goods from Booker, because as a wholesaler, which has now been taken over by Tesco. So obviously that's very unlocal. So how could we provide a wholesaler that does the job of Booker, and then a bakery, because particularly in Rob Hopkins' examples, you know, having a bakery is great for people's well-being, to get involved with it. Space for cookery lessons, teaching people again that don't know how to cook. Ultimately, and then from that, a restaurant communal eating space, so you could buy your food, learn how to cook it, and then eat it. With a community vegetable garden. And then you see that naturally includes transport. How do we get people there? You know, how do we get buses, maybe bespoke buses, cycle routes, those sorts of things. And then it just went on to apprentice type courses. So training people, maybe getting support from local businesses to provide training courses. A brewery and a tap room, because you can't really have a community without one of those. And then community space, which people felt quite strongly about, for definitely crafting and making. So it all paints a very kind of idyllic, kind of hub. Okay, next one. This we refer to local futures a lot, and Helena Norberg Hodge, and in fact our very first workshop we showed the latest local futures video, which is fantastic, all about food and globalization versus localization. So a lot of our conversation are around that, and these are just quotes from that video. The fact we're imprisoned in a globalizing food economy, and we know we need to shorten the link between the farmer and the consumer, and the fact that diversified farms are actually far more productive than monocultures. Next. Yeah, again, these are from, this is just always good to remind us of. When I first showed this, you always get gasps around the room. And this is just the UK. So we are importing 114 tonnes of milk and exporting 119 tonnes, importing 174 tonnes of bread, exporting 148 tonnes, eggs, importing 21,000 tonnes and exporting 30,000, and pork, not that's relevant to me, but 158,000 tonnes versus 258,000 tonnes being exported. And the final one, which I've just added in, again from the same video, shrimps from Scotland are shipped 6,000 miles to Thailand just to be peeled, then shipped back to be sold in the UK. And also, as we know, that trade movement like this for food is not taking into account in a country's carbon footprint. Mm-hmm. So it escapes all of those statistics. But interestingly, what it does show you that actually we don't need to import. Of those things that are on that slide, we've actually got enough. We can create enough for us without having to import as well. Okay, next. And again, along the same lines, I'm sure most of you come across the 80-20 rule. We use it a lot in financial services. The fact that 20% of your clients give you the most business, but in fact we spend 80% of our time on the non-profitable ones. And I didn't know actually that this figure came from a figure of the land in Italy, where it says 80% of the land is owned by 20% of the people. And he backed that up by saying his definition of the economy was the appropriation of goods produced by others, with corporations turned into private fiefdoms and cash cows for executives and owners. Wealth has been transferred upwards while crowding out activity that could yield more productive and social value. And actually in Jem Bendel's book, what is it? Breaking Free?
Breaking Together.
Breaking Together. One of the things quite early on, he said, most of us live lives that we surround ourselves by stuff produced by other people. And I think he suggests it in the book. I actually sat in my house and I looked around, and there's not one thing that I can see that surrounds me that's not been made and produced by somebody else. And that's an eye-opener. Next. So again, just a similar statistics on a theme from Rob Hopkins. Totnes spends 31 million on food every year, and 24 million goes out through just 2 supermarkets, which effectively means it's going straight out of the county. And only in January this year, the MP David Jones said around 95% of the food that's consumed in this country is sold by just 12 retailers. And the next slide shows you those 12 retailers. And those that are familiar with ethical consumer, you'll know that those ratings are out of 100 based on all the reports that ethical consumer asks supermarkets to do, based on all the things, in fact, that fall into the donut, you know, equality, employment, social, energy use. So all the things that fall into the donut. I had never heard of Amazon Fresh, but apparently it's a bit like a Tesco Express, something like that, in London. Okay, next. Oh yeah, I just thought I'd put this in. In fact, ethical consumer used it. I think we agreed it was Sainsbury's. If you look at the 16, it's the Sainsbury's colours. And you've got on that aisle, we've got chocolate, sweets, biscuits, cereal bars. And actually, I don't know if you can see it, but if you look to the back of the slide, you can see rows and rows of big Coke bottles, big Coke plastic bottles. And then, yeah, I don't have to say it to you, do you? You can see it. Look at all the colours, the bright, unnatural colours, and the plastic containers as far as the eye can see. Quite horrendous. Okay, next one. Oh, this is very interesting because as a group, we've talked a lot about this. This again comes from one of Rob Hopkins' videos because he's now been made honorary resident of Liège in Belgium. And you can find out quite a lot about actually this food belt on the internet, and The Guardian did an article on it as well. But their story is very inspiring. So back in 2013, a group of activists who wanted to make food and city life better, greener and fairer brought 600 people together, all with an interest in food production. And the question was, what if the majority of food eaten in Liège came from the land closest to Liège? And this is the bit I find truly impressive and inspiring, is they started by raising 5 million euros solely from the people of Liège. And that gave them enough to start this cooperative. And so by 2018, they had created 27 new cooperatives, opened 4 shops, created 2 vineyards, a farm, and a brewery. And the aim is in 35 years, if it's not too late, the majority of food consumed in the Liège region will be grown locally in the best ecological and social conditions. And their goals are to take it out much further, you know, to hospitals and schools, and work with all of them. Okay. Oh, fine. Sorry. Right. So that's it. So what we're trying to do now is, I found a site that is up for rent. It actually belongs to the farmer who lives just down the track. And we're going to try and see if we can fundraise, and I've taken on that role, if you like, to see if we can get enough money to start to create a space that does all the things that we've talked about. So because my background is finance, I said, right, I'm going to give a go at finding out how to raise the money. And then as it starts to develop, then different people can get involved in the areas that they feel their commitment will be, their skills, whatever it may be. So that was our discussion on Sunday, which was a really exciting discussion, because we got right down to actually, how do we do this? You know, whereas up until now, all the conversations have been, isn't it great? You know, lots of people keep using the word talking shops. You know, there's nothing wrong in a sense with talking shops, but it's very easy if you're with a group of like-minded people to just sit around and chat and say, you know, isn't the world in a sorry state, and we all should be doing this, and how do we convert those people that are not like-minded to feel the same thing? And it's great, and I think it's a very important part of how a group evolves, or that's what we're finding. But actually trying to take an idea and turn it into something that really works is going to be the biggest challenge, an exciting challenge, but a big, big challenge. And the other thing we're trying to do, and this very much sits in the Doughnut model rather than just say the transition town model, and we've got loads of transition groups around here, and they're all very nice, and they all run the repair shops and the cycle repair shops, and there's a really good car sharing one in Malvern, and it's great, and there's a place for all of that, but it's just all very nice, if you know what I mean, without being rude to all these people. Whereas what we're trying to do is create something bigger and more inclusive. And yes, it's going to be hard, but we're going to give it a go. So yes, that was my bit. And then we were going to move on to the visioning exercise, because I did this visioning exercise. It's actually from Rob Hopkins, but I did it on our second Doughnut workshop. And to start it was funny, because we're not, you know, the group is not edge type people. And a lot of people, when I said I was going to do this vision exercise, you can see them kind of, you know, sort of shuffling in their seats and, oh, I'm not sure I want to do this. And we were sitting in a big circle, and a couple of people actually physically moved their chairs backwards. So they were slightly on the outside of the circle, which is really funny. But by the end of it, you know, everybody, every single one was completely engaged. And the list of what the community hub might look like very much came out of the visioning exercise. So because it worked well at the Edge reunion, and I did it last week actually for the Malvern Green Party, it worked really well with them. It seemed like a really good thing to do. And then at the end of it, we don't need to go into breakout rooms, do we? We can just talk through what came out of it for each of us, and then how we feel we could use what came out of the visioning exercise in conjunction with the whole idea of the donut economics. Yes.
Joanna, would you be able to send that to me, the visioning exercise?
Yes.
I would love that. Thank you. That would help.
Yeah, no. You mean send it now, or because I'm just going to read it
Now, you know, when
yeah, absolutely, yes.
2 weeks, whatever.
Yes, it's really good, and this will be the 5th time I think I've read it, and even I do it. Even though I'm reading it, I do it, and the people that have done it more than once say, I suppose, like most meditations, say they go deeper every time. And the first time I read it, I actually cried when I got to the end of it because I didn't want to come back from the place that I'd gone to. Okay, are we ready?
Yep.
Yep. Yes, I was just going to say, if you don't have to mute yourselves. Right, okay, are we ready? Get comfortable in your seat. You may want to have your spine straight and your feet flat on the floor. Many people find it easier to visualize if their eyes are closed, but it's fine if you prefer to keep them open. So let your attention come into this present moment, being aware of the sounds in the room and following the rhythm of your breathing, coming and going. We're going to go on a journey to one possible future for your community, to explore what this world might be like, guided by this process and your imagination. At this moment in time, none of us knows what the future holds, and our actions now will shape what happens. In this journey, we choose to visit a positive future, where communities have successfully made a transition to a viable, thriving, and sustainable way of life. As you relax, invite the intuitive part of your mind to come forward. Let go of the rational, logical left brain and invite your imagination, your creative self, your intuition, the part that can be surprised, that loves sensations like touch, smell, colour, beauty. Imagine that you go to sleep tonight in your bed, wherever that is. And while you are sleeping, a miracle happens. As you sleep, you're transported forwards in a time to a day when the transition has more or less happened. All the changes that are needed for a sustainable presence on the planet have taken place without you having to do any more, go to any more meetings. As you move forward in time, you don't age, you're just visiting this future world at the age you are now. Just imagine yourself drifting forward through the months, the years. Keeping your eyes closed or staying with this imagination, let yourself wake up in this future world. What is the first thing you notice that tells you that this is a different world you're waking up in? Is it a sound? Something about the light? Perhaps the scent of the air? Or the feel of the sheets on your skin? Letting images arise, notice how you get ready for the day in this different world. Getting up, getting dressed. You find something to eat. Perhaps you are alone having breakfast. Perhaps there are other people there. What is the place like? Where are you eating? Notice the taste and texture of the food. How would you know that this meal is a future meal and not one from before? Just letting your imagination guide you without trying to think with your head, letting sensations, smells, sounds, sights arise in your awareness, and imagine these experiences as fully as you can. Now you have a day to explore this world as a visitor or a tourist. You walk out to explore. Where do you want to go? What do you want to see? Find your way to some part of the community's activities. Perhaps something you do for your job in the old life, or something that you're curious about. Take transport to get there, or walk. What do you notice on the way? When you arrive, use all your senses to notice as much as possible about this activity. What technology is being used? What kind of materials? What are the sounds, smells, the shapes of this activity? Who is doing it? What ages? Men, women, people from different cultures? How do the people seem as they work? What does the pace feel like? How do they seem in their bodies? Someone comes over to you to answer your questions, to be your guide. If there's anything you'd like to know, take this opportunity to ask them. Rather than making up the answer yourself, just let the scene play out as if you're watching a film. Perhaps they have an answer that's completely unexpected. What is it like to talk with them? How is it like to look into their eyes? Is there anything that tells you that this is a future conversation and not from before? When you have seen all you need to about this activity, find a way to say and take your leave. Time is passing in this future world, and you're coming to evening now. You've been invited to join people in the community for some kind of gathering. Perhaps it's a meeting with things to decide, perhaps a celebration, a birthday, a harvest, a commemoration. Just let yourself find your way to a place where people are starting to gather. As you arrive, again, notice with all your senses. What are the colours of the place? How is it decorated? Is it indoors or outside? What are the sounds? Is there music, voices, sounds from nature? How does the air smell as evening is falling? Notice who is here, older people, children. How is the event organised? Just let it unfold as if you're watching a film, but with all your senses engaged. You meet more people, you take part, or you observe and listen. So let time move forward again. This day is coming to an end. Take your leave from the gathering. At some point on your journey home, you stop and notice nature around you, the darkness, the scents and sounds of the night. How is it to notice the sky, the living environment? And your day in this future place is ending. You make your way back to your bed and fall asleep again. And in your sleep, you drift back in time, back to this present time, knowing that you can visit this future place again anytime that you wish. So let yourself come back to this year, this time and place, your group meeting, returning fully into your body, taking your time, reconnecting with your breath, with your weight on the chair, and hearing the sounds in the room. And when you are ready, opening your eyes or coming fully back and stretching your body. So my thoughts were to share where we've been. And actually, perhaps, Kim, would you mind just, no, not starting, but just maybe just sort of hosting the discussion? Well, not a discussion, but oh, hang on. Yeah, we can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Where have you gone?
No, I can't hear you. It doesn't say you're muted either. It says you're unmuted.
How weird.
Oh.
Well,
She's such a toughie compared with the rest of us. No. Kimberly, you're going to have to do without me, okay? Right. I am very happy to share, but it would be lovely if somebody else would
I mean,
like to.
I'm happy to share where I went,
Me too.
if that's helpful. Oh, Kathy, did you want to go?
I don't mind. Yeah, I'm happy to go.
Um,
You go. I don't mind.
Okay. So I live in a very rural place already, but I mean, I say rural. Yeah, I'm surrounded by fields on three sides, and then I've got a number. I'm the last house in a block, and I've got a number of other houses up here. Probably only about 5 or 6 houses. There's probably only, I don't know, 30 or so people that live here. So for me, the things I actually wrote a list down. I opened my eyes and wrote a list down. So many things would be different. So, for example, the farms here are complete monocultures. I see them spraying on the farms, and I have got no idea what they're spraying on their crops. So it would be a wonderful. It would no longer be monoculture farming. So that would look radically different, and I think a large amount of the land would be set over to more forest. Basically, there is a forest over here. It would be amazing if that was allowed to expand into this field next to my house, basically. So many things. I don't know. We've got a WhatsApp group, but my knowledge of my neighbours is really, really limited. We don't socialise at all, really. So I would know my neighbours much more. So that idea of a meeting, meeting up with our neighbours, my God, that would be just brilliant. Shared gardening, you know, yeah, eating really tasty organic food, maybe having some shared solar and wind power on some of the space around us. That would be amazing. Yeah, shared cars. I live quite close to Luton Airport, and as I'm sat here, I'm hearing aeroplanes coming in every few minutes. No aeroplanes. Many more people walking, and talking and just taking things a bit slower. Oh my God, yeah. And just a much stronger sense of community. There's a real lack of a sense of community here. It's very, very vague. There we go.
Where I live, it's nominally a village. We're about 4 miles from Woking. And we're quite close to the M25 A3 junction 10. And that one of the main feeder roads goes right past our block. So I think it's something that I noticed during the COVID lockdowns, that the air smelt completely different, and it took me back to when I was a young child. And so yeah, that would happen again. And also the just not having traffic, not having that constant noise. And yeah, walking back at night, just looking up and being able to see the Milky Way. I'm also like 5 minutes walk from Tesco, so we have a lot of light pollution, and hearing owls. And yeah, that would just be amazing. So, yeah.
I settled on porridge, and immediately my brain said no. Fresh proper bread. And I was able to buy a loaf of what I call, dense bread, like it used to be when I was a kid. So I had lovely toast for my breakfast, and I wanted to eat it on my own because I like being silent in the mornings, really. So that was a choice. And then I went for a walk, and I'm in a little cul-de-sac at the end of a 1990s, I guess, housing estate, and there's a dog walking area. I can see it from my window, which is why I bought this house. And I've always wanted that to be more than it is, and it was. it was as I imagined it to be. And there were more birds around. We've lost all our birds. We don't have owls. We can't hear sheep anymore. It's all just changed in the time I've lived here. And there was the sound of bees, well, insects. So that was nice. And my estate joins onto another one. And it's half a mile, at the end of that, half a mile away, really. There's a huge green area. And it's never used. You do occasionally see kids playing football, but a great chunk of it had been taken over to a community garden. And there were people there of all ages, people walking past, talking with their dogs, and and in the evening, there was a community procession by candlelight and lanterns and stuff down to another big space that there is about 3/4 of a mile away. This is all got, council green space. It's just grass with some trees, but there's actually a river that flows through there. And there was a campfire, and there was some sort of, get together, and there were people of different ages, and you could hear the sound of the river. It's a stream, it's not a river really, but you could hear it if you were up close to it. And the other side of the river, which you can cross, there's 2 or 3 bridges. There are farmers' fields, and those, I don't see how. Anyway, that's not relevant. There are farmers' fields, and the community had bought them, and again there was food being produced there, and the hedgerows were back, and there was more, wildlife and things. And what struck me about the allotments, the community gardens, of which there was more than the one that I saw, was how multi-ethnic it was. There was a number of different ethnicities near me. I don't know how many. I would hazard a guess at something like 12. And people were growing what is familiar to them, and they were showing people how to make bread, like flatbreads and stuff in the kitchen. And it was just very much a community, which is what I want to try and build. So it was a nice fantasy.
When I do this, as it's the 4th time I've done it now, and I kind of go to the same place. It's not very obvious where it is. And it's interesting listening to the 3 of you, because you've talked about how you would see where you are living now, how you would like where you're living now to look. Whereas I just think it's not going to be possible where I live. So I don't know where it is that I go, but it's got everything that you have said. No car noise. Everywhere you look is just fields full of wildlife and food. And so much colour. I always, when I do this, I see so much colour, particularly in the evening gathering. There's the campfire, there's music. Yeah, but people making music, sort of almost like ad hoc. People getting together and just playing or maybe singing. And then just colour, the way people dress and behave, and you might not have anything obviously in common with the people at this gathering, but it doesn't matter because you're part of a community, and that's what's important. That's what you have in common. It's the fact that you're part of this community. And going back to the Doughnut, I can't ever see that happening around where I am here. The fact we're imprisoned. Helen Norberg Hodges' description of, she was talking about the food, but we're imprisoned in the whole food system. But we're imprisoned in so many systems, aren't we, that are not good for us, but actually be not much fun. Well, not any fun, actually, a lot of them. So that's why I get very that's just why I get very sad, because this place is lovely that I go to, and I really don't want to come back.
I think for me that what I almost yearn for is trust. You know, when I grew up, you knew your neighbours, you know, and if your mum had to, I don't know, go somewhere, you know, she would arrange it with the neighbours that you could go and stay with them. And there was that trust there, you know, there wasn't any, well, I don't know, you know, what there was, I was a child, but there was trust. And we knew we used to leave our doors open, and people, we had a neighbour called Mrs. Benson. I'll never forget her. She was quite large, well, very large, and she used to give her tent dresses to my mum, and my mum would cut them up and make dresses for me and my sister. You know, and I mean, this is, you know, post-war, but you know, people helped each other out, and there was this deep inherent sense of trust, which I don't think there can be a community without that. And that's what the word trust is what flavored the whole of my vision. That I could walk there, I could walk home late at night. You know, there were people in a community garden, and there was nobody you know, pinching the vegetables or breaking into the shed or whatever. It was just really, you know, maybe a bit of a fantasy, but and I think there are people where I live who would like that, but you know, there aren't many. I don't think there are many, because I think everyone is caught up. You know, and you said about Joanna, it's not. The restrictions are so great, like your fundraising idea, which I think is fabulous. And I know you probably know more about it than I do, but the amount of legislation and regulation that you'll have to go through. I'm not saying don't do it. I think it's wonderful. Do it, you know. But it's like everything's to stop you from doing it rather to enable you to do it. And I think that's what people feel. They feel inhibited and closed down, and they've forgotten what it's like to feel free and to trust.
And interestingly, in our Doughnut workshop, and you know, we're all like-minded, and when we did this visioning exercise, you know, very, very similar experiences, but we're all quite far apart, you know, because we are all living these very fractured independent lives, you know, and thanks to Mrs. Thatcher and her, you know, there is no society. It's like, how do we, you know, it's great having our own little community, you know, once every 2 months or something in this beautiful barn, but how do we get that into our communities? You know, I as Kim and Ed know, I had a very unpleasant experience with my next door neighbour this afternoon, one of many, and I can't ever imagine being part of a community that they're in. So I can't envisage a community right where I am here, which of course is what I love, you know, what I would love. So it's, yeah, how do we bring everybody closer together? So that, you know, you said as well, Ed, you know, you have no real connection with your neighbours, or not in the way that you would like.
Yeah, I think people are people, and wherever you live, there are going to be people who don't get on with other people, however much of a community it is. And I actually live in a small block of 5 flats, and we actually all we do trust each other, and we know each other, and we get on pretty well. But just trying to organise anything with 5 people, everybody wants something slightly different. It's exhausting, and I think I like the idea of community living, but I can just imagine it would be like that, only more so. So
right, and actually, the guides that are on the Transition Network website, and they're really good, and that's where the visualization comes from. When Rob Hopkins talks about the structure of creating a transition group, you know, you start with the couple, you have the idea, and then you build a kind of core group, which shouldn't be more than 8, and then you go on to different groups. And and he says you will get a time, I can't remember what he calls it now, I had remembered, but where you start to fall out, you know, or people have different ideas, and you just have to accept that that's going to happen. But then, yes,
Yeah, definitely.
how do you keep going? And there are lots of the transition groups near me that actually give up because they get what they call burnout.
Yeah.
You know, it's just too hard for them to keep going.
It is hard. I do wonder whether, you know, see, we've got all sorts of people on different parts of the ladder, if you like, or whatever the diagram is that Kim shows during the Edge program. In terms of getting closer to accepting that we're heading for collapse. Part of the problem, I think, is, you know, I don't want to look at history through rose-tinted glasses, but when you look at, you know, the kind of spirit that was on the go in Britain during the Second World War, and that was on the go during COVID, and, you know, all the mutual aid that came out of that, when there was a clear, you know, enemy, if you like, maybe, you know, there was something that was there was an urgent and important imperative to act, and everyone got that, and that was coming bottom up and top down. The levels of cooperation went up, right? And it just seems to me like we're living in this, and we all know it, right? We're living in this farcical world now, where you're not getting that level of information. You're not being told how. A lot of people don't. You know, unfortunately, we're in a minority, a growing minority, but a minority of people that kind of get how awful it's going to be. Yeah. But we're working like the rest of the world, like your neighbor Jay with his BMW that he's revving. I'm guessing that he's a long way away from being collapse away. If he was, you know, do you know what I mean? So if we could all just move the dial on how many people get this, and I know this is really difficult, right? And we've got to be mindful of all the mental health fallout and all the rest of it. The problem is we are little islands of collapse awareness in a sea of business as usual people, and I think that's a massive inhibitor to getting the kind of community spirit that we want to see.
Yeah.
But I think as little islands, little pockets that we are, it is behoven on us to support each other so people don't get burnt out. You know, to help them say, Kathy, you're getting too intense here. You know, this isn't going to last. You've got to put a break on here or whatever. You know what I mean? I think we need to really not be islands. We need to be islands that are connected by roads or rivers or canals or something, so we can, even if it's I mean, I'm totally a novice at this, totally a novice, but you know, going to meet people where they are. So if, you know, if I came to Herefordshire and met you, Joanna, in your community hub group or whatever, you know, I know that costs money, and maybe there won't be petrol or cars and things. It'd be much more difficult in the future. But you know, it's like you know, remotivating and learning from others, and realizing that you're not the only one who's got a difficult neighbour. And I don't mean that in any rude way to you, but maybe somebody might be able to find a way in, you know, say something that might make you think, maybe that's a way in. I could try that with him or with her, whatever, you know. But when we're in little islands on our own, well, when I'm in an island on my own, I might have broken through today, but we'll see. I'm in an island on my own, and it just feels like too big. You know, it feels like a massive cast iron wall to break through, but I have no idea that it's a cast iron wall, but that's what it feels like, but I've no idea until I try, sort of thing. But I do think we need to support each other. I really do. And I know I'm going on a bit, so I'm sorry, but I do think, you know, I agree with Kim and every one of us about you know, the collapse. I've no disagreement with that at all, but we do have to start with where people are. Even if we think, well, that's going to take years, and it'll be too late. Well, maybe it is going to be too late, but we've got to start with where people are. Have you heard of warm data?
No.
Yeah, something Bateson, I can't remember her first name. She set up these hubs around the country and globally, and I've been reading about it, and I met someone who said she would come here to where I live if I can arrange an event, and she would talk, and I'd invite people, maybe, hopefully. And
say Nora Bates. Nora.
Yeah, Bates. Yeah. And I was so excited, and I showed her email which she'd sent me. I showed it to some friends of mine, and you should have seen their faces. They sort of went, what?
Yeah. Are you still not speaking? Sorry to interrupt you. Are you still not? Can we still not hear you, Kim? No, that's why you posted. Yes.
Yeah. But sometimes I think the best thing we can do, because we're not going to convince everybody, and it's going to come as a terrible shock to a lot of people, is just be prepared so that when things start going really wrong, at least we've thought about it, and we may have ideas that will help them, without saying I told you so or anything, but just preparing for what's coming as best we can.
Yeah.
And just as people experience various things that are going to happen, and okay, yeah, we did think of that a while ago, and this is what we thought, and just to be there as a resource. I mean, it's pointless trying to shove it down people's throats, because it's business as usual, isn't it? I mean, it's like my sister-in-law, who's sort of very corporate, and my next car is going to be an Audi, and I'm sort of thinking, hope so. Good luck.
Right, Kim has just yes, we are approaching 8:30.
Oh yeah.
Thank you very much for the feedback post. I always find that really fascinating, and
I never remember to do the chats.
yeah, well, because Kim can't, we can't hear her. So I'm going to look up this warm data thing. Yes, thank you. Right, Ed, anything you want to
I know Kim was just keen to say thank you to everybody. So thank you, everybody. Thanks to Kim as well for giving us this opportunity. I know there's only like 5 of us here this evening, but I think this is going to be sent around, maybe a link to this. So there'll be more resources, and it's recorded now, so more people can see it, which is great, right? So anything we can do to get people stimulated and thinking about donut economics is wonderful. Yeah, Kathy.
As part of what's being sent round, would both of you be happy sending your emails? Because I think one of the things I want to do is to set up a range of talks in my local community centre. I haven't got beyond that yet, but well, I have in my mind a bit. And having people like yourselves coming to do the talk you've just done would be fantastic. I've got a house with some floor space and a spare bedroom, but we could make it work.
And in my other group, which I've been doing for 2.5 years now, it's very much that. It's just a monthly meeting, but it's somebody coming to do a talk, or we have a discussion, and that's where I've introduced Kate Rayworth and Jen Bendell and Rob Hopkins and all those sorts of people. It's not difficult to come up with ideas, and people do seem, well, I know they do. They enjoy it very much. It's a lovely gathering.
Thank you.
Amazing. Well, maybe on that note, we should
say
things to a close, unless there's anything else. No, good. Well, brilliant. Look, lovely to meet you all. Thank you so much to you all. Have a good evening.
Right. Thank you. Bye.
Cheerio.
Bye, everyone.